A diplomatic development is drawing intense international attention after an official White House source confirmed that U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed in principle to hold a summit scheduled for August 15, 2025, in the U.S. state of Alaska. This will mark the first in-person meeting between the U.S. and Russian leaders since 2021, and the first U.S.-Russia summit to take place on American soil since 1988. President Trump announced the plan publicly via his social media account, stating that the primary goal of the meeting is to discuss a peaceful resolution to the Russia-Ukraine war, which has now lasted for over 3.5 years. The development comes as fighting remains intense, with Russian drone and missile strikes continuing against Ukrainian territory, and as Western nations growing increasingly concerned about the prospects for a sustainable peace deal. Questions are mounting over what concessions each side might be willing to accept, and over the roles of other key stakeholders, particularly Ukraine and its European allies. Analysts note that hosting the summit in Alaska is not only logistically safer and more convenient for the Russian side, but also carries symbolic weight in the context of the global geopolitical chessboard. According to NBC News and diplomatic sources, plans for the summit have been under discussion for some time, with certain details still being finalized. A senior White House official said Alaska was chosen for several reasons, including the possibility for the Russian president's plane to fly over the Arctic and avoid airspace of countries hostile to Moscow, thereby reducing security risks. For Russia, setting foot on U.S. soil carries significant domestic propaganda value, projecting an image of a leader capable of challenging Washington and reinforcing the message that the country is not isolated. Internationally, President Putin is seeking diplomatic recognition and the image of being on equal footing with the U.S. leader. Some analysts believe the choice of location could be the opening step toward negotiations over a possible land for peace framework or the easing of sanctions against Russia. Reports from the BBC and CBS suggest that discussions may revolve around a territorial division plan, under which Russia would retain the entire Donbass region, continue its control of Crimea, and gain the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. In exchange, Ukraine would keep its remaining territory and be expected to end the conflict. Sources indicate that the White House has been lobbying certain European leaders to accept this proposal, despite concerns that it could undermine the principle of respecting territorial sovereignty. Ukraine, for its part, has maintained a firm stance, insisting it will only accept a genuine peace process and will not trade away sovereignty for a quick deal. The Kremlin has confirmed its agreement to the summit, with President Putin emphasizing the importance of dialogue with Washington and raising the possibility of a cooperation memorandum. However, sources close to Russian officials say Moscow will not accept a ceasefire without significant concessions, especially regarding recognition of its control over strategic territories in Ukraine. Analysts believe the Alaska summit could either become a turning point toward ending the conflict or the prelude to controversial agreements on the world stage. For President Trump, it will be the biggest test of his term, balancing his promise of peace with the risk of being accused of sacrificing principles for an immediate deal. For President Putin, it is an opportunity to reinforce his strong leader image and demonstrate that Russia remains an active player in global power politics. In today's complex international climate, the Alaska meeting is more than just a face-to-face encounter between two of the world's most powerful leaders. It reflects broader strategic moves by both Washington and Moscow. According to diplomatic sources, preparations have involved multiple rounds of closed-door negotiations, with participation from security advisors, diplomats, and strategic experts. Both sides are carefully weighing their interests, risks, and the messages they intend to send to the global audience. For the U.S., hosting the summit on its own soil showcases initiative and leadership in global security affairs. For Russia, it is a chance to break the image of isolation and signal that it can still negotiate on equal terms with the U.S. despite heavy sanctions. Some European policy analysts believe this meeting could be the visible tip of a negotiation process quietly underway for months, as both sides face mounting economic and political costs from the war. Data from international research organizations show that infrastructure damage in Ukraine has exceeded hundreds of billions of dollars, while Russia's military expenditures have reached their highest level since the Cold War. This creates pressure to find an off-ramp, even temporary, to ease domestic financial and political strain. Still, the road to peace is fraught with obstacles. Ukraine insists that any agreement must uphold the principles of territorial integrity and international law. Western allies, especially the EU and NATO, warn that any land for peace deal could set a dangerous precedent, encouraging similar actions in other conflict zones. In the US, some worry that excessive concessions from President Trump could undermine America's credibility and deterrence. From Moscow's perspective, the Kremlin is expected to maximize the summit for its strategic objectives. Securing control over key territories would allow Russia to declare victory domestically and boost national morale. It might also open the door to the easing or lifting of certain sanctions, creating opportunities for economic recovery and renewed trade. The key question now is whether both leaders have the political will and flexibility to overcome barriers and strike a balance between national interests and international pressure. Whatever the outcome, the Alaska summit will have far-reaching consequences for regional and global security for years to come. Diplomats, experts, and the global public will be watching closely for every signal and statement behind closed doors, knowing that any shift could change the trajectory of war and peace. If an agreement emerges, even a preliminary one, it could bring significant implications for defense, security, and economic affairs. A ceasefire could temporarily ease military pressure in Ukraine, giving both sides a chance to regroup and reinforce positions. But it could also be exploited as a pause to prepare for future offensives if political or military conditions shift. From a regional security perspective, a successful deal could reduce the risk of the conflict spilling over into NATO countries in Eastern Europe. De-escalation could revive multilateral security dialogues stalled since 2022. Conversely, failure could lead to heightened confrontation as both Russia and Ukraine seek battlefield advantages before future talks. On the economic front, any sign of détente would immediately impact global energy and financial markets. Oil and gas prices could drop if markets believe Russian supply will stabilize. European stock markets could rally as geopolitical risks ease. But if talks collapse and fighting intensifies, energy prices would spike, fueling inflation and economic instability in many countries. A potential Alaska agreement could also reshape alliances and relations among major powers. A U.S.-Russia settlement reached without full involvement from Ukraine and its European allies might create rifts within the Western Bloc, with some nations seeing it as a sacrifice of principles for short-term gains, sparking internal debates over foreign and security policy. From now until August 15, 2025, multiple scenarios are possible. Behind-the-scenes negotiations will continue, and public diplomatic statements may be adjusted to gain leverage before the official talks. The participation or absence of other actors such as Ukraine, the EU, NATO, China, or Turkey will be critical in shaping the outcome. All eyes will be on Alaska on the day of the summit, as the world waits to see whether it will mark a turning point towards peace or simply another chapter in a conflict with no end in sight. The Trump-Putin summit on August 15, 2025 is being viewed as a historic test for both leaders and for the global security landscape. It is not only an opportunity for the U.S. and Russia to directly discuss a peace solution for the Russia-Ukraine war, but also a test of the credibility of diplomatic commitments in an unstable world. With this being the first US-Russia summit on American soil since 1988, the event has captured the close attention of the public and analysts worldwide. According to many experts, the outcome could have deep impacts on current international relations. A ceasefire or peace deal could ease tensions in Europe, stabilize energy markets, and create space for economic and social reconstruction. However, a territorial concession deal, while potentially ending the fighting, would spark lasting controversy and risk undermining the principle of national sovereignty, a cornerstone of the international order. If talks fail, the conflict could escalate further, with both sides seeking to gain battlefield advantage to improve their negotiating positions later. This would threaten regional security and could have cascading effects on the global economy, trade, and humanitarian situation. For Trump, the summit is a chance to project himself as a leader capable of resolving major global conflicts. But it is also a challenge, as every decision will be scrutinized by the public and political opponents. For Putin, it is a platform to reinforce the message that Russia remains a respected power and to pursue long-term strategic gains. Whatever the result, August 15, 2025 in Alaska will be remembered as a moment when two of the world's most powerful leaders sat down to decide the fate of a war that is reshaping the global political map.